Hello and welcome to this week's BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar. Our weekly webinars are aimed to provide advice and share knowledge amongst business owners, and this is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client who would like to access our archive of webinars, then please do visit our website biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. Our host joining me today is BizSmart Select member and BizSmart advisor Ian Priest. But before we start today's webinar, can I ask you all to use the question mark function on your screen and post any questions that you may have for Ian, and he will do his best to answer them all at the end of the session. Thank you, Ian. Over to you.
Hi, thank you. Last time I did one of these webinars, we were talking about financing, buying and selling a business. This one wants to take a closer look at some of the practicalities of buying and selling businesses. So, can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. If you're selling, hopefully it will give you a guide as to what and how buyers are looking for, and it can have a major impact on what you end up with in terms of money if you understand what buyers are coming from and are prepared to meet the buyer's expectations. Obviously, the terms you agree with between any buyer and seller will involve a degree of risk to both of you. It's a sliding scale, and you have to understand where you are on that scale in terms of where the balance of power sits and how the amount of money you will get for your business and the terms that you can dictate. We covered this in the last webinar, but it's worth going over again as it is vitally important. Whether you are selling or buying shares or selling or buying assets, as a buyer, as a rule of thumb, you want to be buying assets. As a seller, generally, you're better off selling shares. That's in an ideal world. It very rarely is. If you're buying assets, you're paying a fixed price for a fixed set of assets, and you may take some liabilities with that. So, for example, you'll buy the plant and machinery, the premises, the stock, the debtor book, all assets. You may agree to take on the outstanding trade creditors on there, but you will have a definitive list of what you're buying and what's being sold, and you will have a fixed price for that. If you're selling assets, you get the fixed price, but the problem is the money ends up in the company. It's the company that's selling the assets, not you. You still have to get the cash out, and there can be tax implications to winding up a business that has just got a pot of cash sat in it. Buying shares. Buying shares is quite messy. You get the company and have all its baggage, everything that goes with it. You cannot say to the revenue, for example, oh, that happened 6 months before I got here, it's nothing to do with me. It's the company that they are investigating, not you, and you own the company. So due diligence when you're buying shares is vitally important. HMRC can go back a number of years, and as I said on the slide, a VAT investigation that crops up 3 months after you purchase can go back several years, and the buck stops with you because it's your company. So it is important, if you're buying shares, you get the due diligence right. So you need to look at all the contracts of employment, any potential HMRC risks, any outstanding potential claims against the company from employees, insurance claims, warranties, the whole kit and caboodle. When you're selling shares, you get the money for your shares. It doesn't go to the company, it goes to you because it's you that's selling the shares. And at present, obviously it's always subject to change by the Chancellor, but subject to certain qualifying criteria. If you're selling shares, generally you qualify for entrepreneurs relief and you only pay 10% tax on what you sell. And all the liabilities for the company from the past pass over to the buyer. So for a seller, yeah, sell shares every time. So when you're buying a company, at the end of the day, it all comes down to experience. If you're looking to buy a business, you need to think about, before you even start thinking about raising money, you have to be honest with yourself and answer, have you got the skills, knowledge, experience, track record to be able to run this business successfully? As a vendor, you want to know that the buyer has got that experience, because if they haven't got the skills necessary, they're going to find it very difficult to raise the finance. And depending on the type of business, that can be a huge range of skills, from just general management ability for some businesses is great. I dealt in the past with funding of a very high-tech business that deals with TV broadcast up to satellite and back down again, which is all scrambled together, and they have to scramble it at one end, send it up to a satellite, and when it comes back down they have to unscramble it and separate it out again. Highly technical. These guys had got multiple degrees in physics and understood how it worked and how to make it better. If they hadn't got that experience, there'd have been no point in them trying to buy a business like that. So it's vital that if you're buying a business, that you understand what skills are needed for it, and that you can demonstrate you've got that knowledge and track record of management to be able to do it. On the flip side, if you're thinking about selling the business, you really need to ask yourself, have you got a business you can sell? Having a business you can sell is quite a difficult place to be. Most businesses are not in a position that they can be sold easily. You might think that this slide is a bit daft. Ask yourself if you could go on holiday for 3 months at short notice and be satisfied that when you get back the business will still be running on quite happily. But I'm pretty deadly serious on that. If you couldn't drop out of the business tomorrow and disappear for 3 months and know that it will still be running happily when you get back, you've got to question whether you've got a business you can sell. If the answer is no, I'm indispensable to the business, then you've answered the question. If you're indispensable, how can you sell it? You can't sell yourself. If the answer is, I couldn't do it at the moment, but given some training and some more development, the staff could cope, then potentially you've got a business that could be sold, provided you put the hours in now to get the staff into a position where they could cope and they could run the business quite happily without you. And this can take quite a long period to achieve. It might mean hiring more or even different staff to get to where you are. You need to identify all the things that you do and all the skills and knowledge you have that you require to do that, and do a real audit on yourself, and then audit your staff and see where the gaps are. And if the existing staff haven't got the knowledge, experience, skill to replace you, then you need to think about bringing in other people that will have. Because unless you've got that tier of management below you that can operate the business, it's very difficult for a buyer to come in, because they won't have your skills and knowledge about your business. They may have known a similar business and know the mechanics of it, but they won't know the fine detail of how your business runs, and every business is different. So you do need that tier below you. On the flip side, if the answer is, yeah, I could walk out tomorrow and come back in 3 months, then all would be well, then yeah, you've got a business that's very marketable that could generate potentially large sums of money. How you value a business is a different question altogether. And I often say you could put 10 accountants in a room and come up with 32 different valuations. If the experience is right on both sides, you may have a deal, but then it comes down to the details, and the devil is always in the details. So what's the purchase price going to be? What exactly are you selling? Do you actually own what you're selling? You'd be surprised at the number of times I've come across deals that are going on quite happily and they suddenly stall because they discover they don't own the rights to the website, or there's questions over intellectual property, or whether somebody else has stolen the intellectual property, or even whether they have the right to use the intellectual property. So you need to be very clear on what you're selling, who owns it, and that you've got the proper protections in place for your intellectual property. I'm dealing with a guy at the moment who's looking to buy 2 businesses. One has not got any intellectual property it can protect. It's making a decent level of profit. It's a nice business. It's got some good ongoing contracts, and he's paying about £2 million for that. The other one has got very, very well protected and well-known intellectual property. They've got the worldwide rights to that intellectual property, except for the USA, which they sold some years ago. It's actually producing a not dissimilar level of profit. But the purchase price for that one's 8 million, not 2. Having that protected intellectual property so that if anybody wants to use it anywhere in the world, they've got to come to you, makes a huge difference. Buyers will want to know how much of the purchase price has got to be paid on day one and how much can be deferred and paid over a period. Again, a lot of people, when they're thinking about selling a business, think that's really strange. You're selling a business, you expect to be paid. Like if you're selling a car, you expect to have the money in your hand or in your bank account before they drive the car away. Buyers will have a different opinion. They will want to pay as little as possible on day one and pay you the balance out of the cash being generated by the business over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You also need to think about what assets are available within the business to help fund the purchase. We covered this off in detail last time, but buyers will want to use the assets of the company to help them buy the company. So if you've already got them mortgaged up to the hilt, they're going to struggle to raise additional cash from that, and it's going to impinge dramatically on the valuation of the business. The other question is how long you're prepared to stay with the business. Are you going to stay on a consultancy basis or on an earn-out basis? Are you going to make some of the purchase price contingent on future profit levels? There's all sorts of details that need to be hammered out. It's a game of give and take, and it can be poker. Who's bluffing and who holds the high cards? If you make sure that your business can operate without you, that you've got your IP protected, you know exactly what you're selling, your valuation's realistic, your future market and profitability is as secure as you can make it, then you hold the high cards. If you don't get those things right, the buyer will be in the driving seat, and that means the price is driving in one direction and one direction only, and that's down. There you go. Hopefully that's given you some things to think about. It's not a complete guide to buying and selling businesses, but it does give you a flavour of some of the things you need to think about. Through the advisors at BizSmart, we can provide more support and advice to you should you need it.
Thank you very much, Ian. Excuse me. Let's see if there's any questions for you. Your first one through is from Stuart, and he asks, how long does it take to get a business ready to sell?
Oh, that really is how long's a piece of string. Some businesses can be ready to sell in a very short space of time because they've got everything in place. I've known other businesses where it can take 5 years to get everything in, and a lot of work in that 5-year period. But it's worth it because it's adding noughts onto the value you'll get for the business when it's done. It's an impossible question to answer. It depends on the individual business. But the more prepared you are, the more you have, as I said before, the management that can operate the business below you, the processes and systems documented, your IP protected. The more things you get right as you go along, the easier and quicker it is to sell. In fact, some commentators always say you should never start a business without thinking about your exit route and get that plan for your exit from day one.
Okay, thank you very much. Your next question is from Phoebe, and she asks, should I offer a handover period, or is it best to just walk away?
Again, that's a very difficult question to answer. It depends on individual circumstances. If the business can operate entirely without you, then there is the option to walk away, take the cash and run. You don't want to be hanging around like the ghost of Christmas past, getting in the way of the new management team if they want to change things. On the other hand, the management team may need you there for a period to help with the handover, to help with the transition, particularly of key customers or key suppliers, to make sure they stay comfortable with what's going on. They may want to link the purchase price to the profits being derived by the business over the next 2, 3, 4 years on what's called an earn-out, in which case they will expect you to stay with the business for a period to help drive those profits. So what the deal I mentioned before, although they've got the IP all protected and getting a much bigger purchase price, part of it is still deferred. On that one, it's not dependent on future sales. It's just the vendors paying them some each year at the end over 3 years. On the smaller of the two transactions, because they haven't got the IP in place, he actually needs the owner to stay for a while they get the processes and everything documented and buttoned down. So that one is very much on an earn-out, and a large part of the £2 million depends on the profits over the first 2 years after purchase. And if the profit figures don't hit the agreed figures, then they don't pay.
Great, thank you very much. Another question has come through from Simon. What help can I get to get my business ready to sell?
There are a number of people out there that can help you get your business ready for sale. I would suggest your first port of call should be talk to BizSmart. And if you are seriously thinking about getting a business ready for sale, then Smart Boards is a great way to do that. That will give you a great deal of help and support over a 6 to 12 month period to help you get the business and think through all the things you need to do for your individual business. You can't. There isn't a generic route map because every business is different. You need to think through how it impacts your business. So yeah, come and talk to us at BizSmart. Brilliant.
Great, thank you again, Ian, for hosting today's webinar. I will send out a copy of the presentation and Ian's contact details out to you all very shortly. So please do email him direct with any further questions that you may have. Before we close, just a quick reminder that this webinar is part of our service to our Smart Room members. If you're not already a member or a BizSmart client and would like to access our archive of webinars, then please visit our website. biz-smart.co.uk and go to the Smart Room page. Thank you again, Ian. That's the end of today's BizSmart webinar. Thank you all for listening, and please join us again very soon.